as long as you wish.
Thank you. I'll formally declare the meeting open. It's the Ordinary Council meeting, 27th of August 2020. And we'll start with an opening karakia. I wonder, Paul, whether you could do that.
Kei mō tātou, he honore he korori, he maungongo ki te whenua, whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Te mātu te rangi, whakapaingi e tātou, ngā tātou hui, whakapaingi o mātou kōrero ki te hua he tika, I tēnei rā. Amen.
Move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is the apologies, and at this time no apologies have been received. Move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the declaration of interest. The document has been circulated on Team Systems, and here's the document which will pass around. If councillors have an interest, if they could remember to describe what the interest is, whether it's punitory, whether it's whatever it is. Just a wee bit clearer. It would be great. Move on to item 4 on the agenda, and that's the urgent items not on the agenda. Ask the executive if there are any items. Thank you. Move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting. And we'll move to the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting, 23rd of July 2020. Now the minutes have been circulated to councillors, they've been up on Team Systems. We've had no request for any changes. Are there any councillors that have changes or matters they wish to question in relation to minutes? No. In that case, I'd invite councillor to resolve that the minutes of the council meeting held on the 23rd of July 2020 be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. So moved. Deputy Mayor Carruthers, Councillor Neal, those in favour?
Aye.
Move now to item 6 for the meeting, which is the action list, and it's on pages 5 to 6 of your agenda, and I'll invite the Chief Executive to present the agenda item.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, Your Worship and Councillors. We'll take you through these one by one. Canary student cycle trail, good progress there. So we're ready to install. We're just waiting for the fibre cable installation to be completed, and then we'll be doing both pieces of that project in one go. Speed limits, we have a draft document ready to go. We're proposing to present a report to the Planning and Regulatory Committee for endorsement, and following that endorsement, go out for consultation. So that committee meeting is planned for the 10th of September. Transfer of Pinkerton Housing to Destination Westland, developing a strategy document in regards to elderly housing. Understand that that consultant has now been appointed and that work is underway. Carnegie boarding, still waiting for a final announcement from Cultural and Heritage Fund. I just want to highlight that that the Carnegie boarding is open and is actually displaying luminaries display at the moment, and will stay open until we have a decision on the future funding. As you recall, the last meeting, lotteries have declined a second application. If funding doesn't come through from Cultural and Heritage Fund, propose that we recalibrate and bring back to council the next steps or next options. Fox Landfill, we have obviously announced funding for the relocation of the Fox Landfill through back to Butler's Landfill, including a new cell at Butler's. We've received draft condition contracts for that project, and we're working through that with government. So that'll start once we've assigned contractors for that work. Very pleased that that's come through. iwi representation around the table. We recalled last time that we potentially put a remit forward to LGNZ regarding this approach. So that will be targeted for next July. We'll be asking for support from council in terms of drafting that remit, and obviously we need 4 other councils to join us to make it a formal remit. And finally, just following on from the Remu Woodstock lookout, we have taken ownership of this, and we found the documentation quite some time ago that it was officially passed over to council. Unfortunately, at the time, it wasn't added to our asset register, which we're addressing now. Just an update, all graffiti has been removed and the shed cleaned. The damage interpretation panels have been removed, repaired and refitted this week. The 3 signs lost with the local printer for reprinting. The Valley photo display is damaged beyond repair. It's been torched several times by the looks of it. So we're looking to replace that photo. There is a bigger issue in terms of the Remu Lightning walking trail maintenance repairs. There is some unsafe areas on that piece of walking track. So we'll be working in terms of with contractors and DOC assisting us with bringing that trail back up to the right standard.
Thanks, Simon. We'll open the matter for discussion. Paul.
Thank you, Bishop. Firstly, the Remu lookout is just pass on appreciation for the work done there. So, yeah, it's made a real difference. West Roads are up there today, actually, working on the lightning track.
Great.
They seem to have some tailings that are spreading down to try to stop that scouring. Other than that, it's looking pretty good. And there's still a little bit of graffiti on the one shelf, but that's about it. But it's a huge improvement until next time, when the next vandal comes along.
We'll keep a close eye on that.
Appreciate it. The other one I wanted to comment on, which is the Carnegie building. There's seems to be some perception out there that the current proposal for the Mountain J building over here is an either-or situation. It's either the purchase the building across the road or it's the Carnegie building. But I think the council probably would serve the public well to put some facts out about the Carnegie building, such as the fact that it cannot be brought up in its current state to modern museum standards. It's impossible. It cannot be brought up as a library because it's just unsuitable. It's perfectly suited for an art gallery, however. It's perfectly suited for the likes of the museum research center. But as a future museum, it doesn't have a future in my view. And I think those facts are escaping some people, and they seem to think that it's just a matter of save the building and put the museum in there. It's not, because the building behind it, of course, is unsafe and it's had its day and it needs to come down, Drummond Hall. And the Carnegie building does have a future. What exactly is determined, of course, but I think some facts out there might be useful at this time when people are weighing up. And if it's portrayed to them as it is by some people, that it's an either-or situation, and they need the facts about Carnegie building.
Thanks, Paul. Too deep to take that on. Councillor Kenny.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me. The Kaneri cycle trail, I think at the last meeting, I recalled asking if those plans could be made available to elected members. Is that possible? Through the chair?
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry for missing.
No, it's all good. That'll be great. No further questions. Thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Worship. No further questions.
Francois.
Yeah, just one question around the Remu Woodstock lookout and the damage that's been done. And so obviously we're going to replace, well, it sounds like we're going to replace the photo. I mean, what's the likelihood of that getting continuously damaged all the time? Is it behind glass or was it just a photo on some wood or something? I haven't seen it.
It's imprinted into some laminate board, so it's actually a purpose lookout piece of artwork. Yeah, it's not fragile, but someone tried to set it on fire. That's what I can see.
Okay, no, thank you.
Councillor Hartshorn.
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Councillor Cogan.
Yes, I've just got a few questions actually. So with the speed limits, because we've got a completion date for them October 2020. So when do you suspect that the document will go out for consultation with the public for them to give their input into those speed limits? Because this has sort of been, I know with COVID, a bit of an ongoing thing.
So through your worship, we're planning to bring a report to the Planning and Regulatory Committee for endorsement to go out for public consultation. It will be following soon after that meeting. We'll go out for 30 days. So hopefully we'll be able to bring it back with an October council meeting for hearing submissions on the bylaw.
Okay, but we'll get notified prior when submissions are going out so we can notify our elected members, our constituency, sorry. Okay, next question around the pensioner housing. And I know you've got here that there's a consultant appointed, but have they actually given any kind of timeframes around, when we can anticipate a report back on that?
Yeah, through the chair, the expectation is that we have it available before December. We want to include it as part of the long-term plan process. We anticipate it will come back earlier than that. So background here is we went out for expressions of interest for three targeted tenderers and one was selected obviously out of that process. This was managed via Destination Westland, not council staff. But I anticipate it will be done within a couple of months.
Yeah, because I was conscious of with the long-term plan as well. And the other thing was around, so this, with the likes of the Fox Landfill and this, project ready, the shovel-ready projects. Has anyone since from government given us any indication on when all of this wonderful money that we've been promised is actually going to hit our bank account so we can actually start getting underway with it? Because in the meantime, one thing I'm conscious of is further people out in the community are losing jobs. And I mean, apart from the fact that it's going to be great to get these projects done, it is going to create employment opportunities. And the longer we leave it, the more difficult it's going to become for our community people.
Yes, through your worship, we received draft contracts late last week, so the ministers have approved all of the projects. So we're talking Cron Street upgrade, Old Christchurch Road, swimming pool, Fox Landfill, Jackson Bay Wharf. Approved contract. So we have 20 days from now to get the contracts approved with government. So that's in our hands right now. So we're working through that. So finally got across the line.
So, but of course that's another 20 days. And from there, obviously we have to go out to tender process, do we?
Correct.
Okay, so none of these jobs will potentially be underway within the next 2 or 3 months?
So the anticipation is once signing the document that the work starts within 2 months.
Okay. And the only other thing I just wanted to bring up was very similar to what Paul talked about with the Carnegie building. I have had a few messages actually coming through as well with some confusion around the Carnegie building. And I think, I'm not really sure whether in the document that's gone out, it's sort of, it has made it very clear around, you know, if we don't go ahead, not only the problems with the Carnegie in general with its structure, but also, you know, potentially the savings that would be made with not having to invest that extra money that we thought we were going to have to into that particular building. So yeah, it would, I think there just needs to be a bit more discussion or some sort of perhaps another media release, or I don't know how much you can, you know, get actively involved in that submission process, answering some of those extra questions.
Leslie, you have.
Yeah, through the chair, we are governed as to what kind of information we can put out. Audit were very strict with what we put in the consultation document. When we tried to put more information in, they made us take it out. So we can't change the document, we can't change the consultation now it's gone out. The only way we can't put media out because that looks like we're preempting or trying to lead. So we've got to be very specific and clear. What's in the consultation document is what the audit have allowed us to put out.
Thanks, Leslie. And just to be clear, Jenny, the Councillor Cogan, the Carnegie building is not part of the Mountain Jade process. We as a council have committed to strengthening it, and that's what we're doing. We started off with a price of around $900,000. We've raised $1 million. By the time we finished, it was looking at about 1.8 million. So we've had to have a rethink. But council's position is that the building will be strengthened. We're certainly not going to do anything other than ensure that we save it. And secondly, the building is open. And in fact, for those that are listening, going and having a look at the luminaries display or exhibition that's here at the moment, well worth doing. Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just on the Carnegie building, do we have any written reports saying that it's not suitable for a museum or not suitable for a library? And who are those reports from? And do we have a written report saying that it's suitable for an art gallery? And who is that from?
So through Your Worship, when we apply for applications for lotteries, we have applied under the basis that it can be used to host artefacts. So the value of the upgrade will take it up to a point where it can hold and store artefacts on loan from other museums. What I believe that Mr. Madrick's saying is that there's a lot more that needs to be required to be done as part of Drummond Hall and the research centre to make it a proper museum infrastructure, which is what we have in our long-term plan. We have $4.5 million put aside in future years for upgrading to a museum standard. What I'm suggesting is that we revisit past consultation for the Mountain Jane building and look what options we do have. If we are fortunate in getting the extra funds we requested through Culture and Heritage, we go and that'll fund the full upgrade, which I suggest we still carry on and do.
Thank you.
Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's 3 exhibitions in the Carnegie building at the moment, which certainly shows its potential along those lines. And I agree, it's really frustrating with the consultation when people have got questions but can't get answers. So what happens if someone comes to the council with a specific question surrounding the consultation?
We can talk them through that. Yeah.
Okay, so it needs to be that sort of one-on-one type thing?
We can't really put out media that will preempt or lead.
Okay, that's good to know, thank you. Other questions? With the speed limits, once that's gone through consultation, when would it be implemented by, are we thinking?
Execution requires external support via NZTA because it all has to be gazetted. That could take some time. We haven't got a program of execution following that presentation yet.
So it could happen by the end of the year, or it could be
Unlikely,
well into the next year.
but at least we've started that process.
Yeah, for sure. And just one other thing with the iwi representation. Have we spoken to Bullet or Gray about this? Are they likely to support us?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So it's further down the track.
But
Thank
in both cases, they've invited iwi onto their councils. We certainly think that we'll have a coordinated approach. But the actual discussion certainly hasn't taken place.
Fairly optimistic about it.
Very optimistic.
Thank you.
Okay, would someone like to move that the action list be received? Councillor Hart, thank you. Councillor Cogan, those in favour?
Yeah.
Thank you. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the presentations, and there are no presentations at this meeting. Move on to the next item, which is item 8, which is staff reports. And the first staff report is on Harold Creek Raw Water Supply, Harry. It's on pages 7 to 15 of your agenda. And I'll invite Louis Sparks, Group Manager, to come forward and present the report.
Thank you, Worship and Councillors. I've taken the report as read. The purpose of the report is to inform Councillors, Your Worship, of the complications regarding the raw water supply at Harold's Creek in Harry that provides water to a handful of households, I think 6 in total. So the report presents options, options assessment for different solutions to address the issue, which is water supply quality. So currently this is a raw water supply, untreated water supply, and we've proposed, or in the report concludes the recommendation that Council have 2 options. The cost of the first option is a lot higher, was the option to extend the water reticulation, treated water reticulation in Harry out to those properties. The recommendation from the Council though is to provide water tanks to those houses for rainwater collection, and that would be the lower cost option to the ratepayers. So Council will invest in the installation of those, and will the local residents we propose to consult with them on this option if that is passed by Council, and the cost for the investment could be flexible and will be a targeted rate for those residents. Once that's paid off, there's no further water rates applied to that community. So that's what I'd like to highlight. Any questions?
Thanks, Lou. We'll take the report as read, and we'll go around the table. We have got John Sullivan in the room as well, who is one of the landowners. So let's
If I may, Your Worship, can I kick things off? Now, from what I understand, these people that are affected, the first that they've heard about this whole situation is a reporter ringing them up. I find it abhorrent, essentially. Now, 2.5 of the report says that Mr. Sullivan, a farmer, wishes to have water conveyance discontinued through his property as soon as possible. With the that says that Council has spoken to Mr. Sullivan about this. Mr. Sullivan's here, he disputes that, and I would like Mr. Sullivan to come and speak to this, because he's explicitly named within the report and he's not essentially happy about it. Can I pass a motion that allows Mr. Sullivan to speak?
Well, you won't need to do that. I mean, I'll certainly inviting John to speak.
Could we get him to?
Of course.
speak now if he's willing.
Okay, I'm sure. But we will be going around the table.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'd like him to speak first and then we go around the table, if that's all right.
John, would you like to come forward? If you come to where Louis is. Unaccustomed as you are to public speaking. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Well, the history of the Harry water supply is this. In 1970, my father and I put a water supply in for our own farm and their own houses from a spring creek that's in behind Harold Creek. 4 years later, I think the council put a water supply in from Amethyst, which crossed the Wanganui River into the Harry. Within 12 months or so, it got washed out. So we let the council tap into our water supply. So they tapped into it, they put another 2-inch pipe in and about 6 months later, and that kept Harry going for the next 45 years. Now, the council haven't maintained that very well at all. We've done it, we've cleared it. In the old days, we had a roadman in Harry from the council, Herbie Thorpe, and he used to go up there and clear the screens out every so often. But all the council did was put a settling tank in, and they put a screen and some filter socks. It was a pretty easy, cheap water supply for Harry and for Westland District Council. During that time, we haven't had one thank you from council. What? Nothing. Not a bloody thing. And now I get a ring from the Grey Star. The lady tells me that my name's up there stopping these other people or cutting the water off, and they're going to have to pay $10,000 towards putting a tank in for themselves, you see. I haven't said anything. No one's approached me. So that's why I come along here. We were pissed off actually getting my name in there and finding out that way. Thank you.
Well, John, first of all, thanks for taking it. Secondly, from an apology point of view, I personally apologise for any inconvenience it's caused you, and thank you for your 40 years of providing water. The issue here, of course, is not so much about the pipe going across your land. It's more about the fact that there are new water regulations coming in.
Understand that.
And that's where the
understand that. I know the new water regulations are there, but my father lived till he was 95 and we drank this water. My mother lived till she's 85. Mrs. Lucas lived till she was 96. And all these old people around Harry are still alive. A lot there. There's still people 85 getting on for 90. And they've all drunk that water supply up until you guys put that new board out. I know it's not the thing to say in these days, but people have to have a bit of bad stuff in their diet to their antibodies to go too. The other thing is that it's freehold land, and we own that face, the freehold, the face that Woolbury Range there. And this Spring Creek, it's a beautiful little creek that comes directly out of the hill. And we wanted them to go another 50 metres, and they would have got that directly from the hill source, which would have been pure water. But the council never listened to all that stuff anyway. But we haven't mind them going over there, but that's just my say. Thanks very much for hearing me.
Thank you, John. Yep, really appreciate it.
See you guys.
See you, Simon.
Councillors will open the matter up for discussion, but I do have to remind you that the issue, and it's unfortunate that Sally got his name in the report, perhaps, but the issue is not about this particular pipe going through his property. It's about the new regulations and about being able to supply legally compliant potable water. And that's what the issue is. So I'd like to open it up for discussion. Do you have anything further to add, Simon?
No, obviously the next report for council highlights where the water reform is all going. And just to talk about the water regulator, that's just getting up ahead of steam, and it's fair to say that what has been allowed in the past will no longer be allowed. This not only affects council water supplies but private water supplies as well. Anyone that supplies public more than 2 people, and we're talking Ryan Centre, we're talking community walls, will be under the same regulation. So we're being proactive here to try and address this shortcoming of one of our public water supply systems and taking a proactive step. So I suppose just to reinforce, the first thing we'll be doing is consulting with the community in terms of the best steps forward. There's options available. And we want to get this tabled so we can get into the long-term plan so we can actually go out and consult with it.
So what I'll do now is I'll open up for discussion, and Paul, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So it looks like perhaps the staff people's pulled out an old file, because I mean so the sentence in here that Mr. Sullivan wishes to have water conveyance discontinued through his property as soon as possible. Jump out of from here. So it may have been mentioned in the past, I don't know, but it's really unfortunate that it was in here before it was discussed with him. That aside, you're right, Your Worship, that's not the issue. The issue is that the days of backyard water supplies are gone, unfortunately, and I sympathise with what John is saying on that, but the argument ought to be with the government, which is imposing this on us, and I mean, this is only one of many that are going to be Mint Creek and God knows what others are all going to be in the same situation. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare to unravel all of that. So, yeah, that's the message, I think, is that it's the changing times with this new legislation, which we'll talk about later.
Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, I suppose I understand that the water regulations are going to change, but they haven't yet. How can we preempt something when we don't know what the standards are going to be? In terms of the options provided, there's been 2 options provided. And obviously no one's talked to Mr. Sullivan about an option of keeping the pipe on his land. And also, we're going to be voting here to close the Harold Creek scheme. That's in option 1. Now we can't vote on that around the council table. Absolutely not, because to close this scheme, 75% of the residents have to vote to close the scheme first. What happens if they vote not to close the scheme? What are the options then? Louis?
So we don't have an option to continue the current water supply. So that's why we've provided 2 proper solutions to meet the New Zealand water standards. And that is either to connect up through reticulation to the treated water supply out of Harry or provide rainwater tanks. And our recommendation is to provide rainwater tanks. Whichever option we take, council will invest the capital for that, and then there will be a flexible plan for those targeted ratepayers to repay that investment. But we don't have an option to continue that water supply. And that doesn't mean that it can continue as a stock feed. So we're not going to physically remove that scheme or the pipe. Council will just discontinue to maintain that system and provide the alternative as safe drinking water.
So let's say Mr. Sullivan allows the council to put tanks in a treatment system, and has that been looked at?
It is quite the option of treatment is not a viable option for 6 residential homes. So that would be coming at a cost of about $800,000. That would be shared by 6 households.
So it says in 3.3 that the Harold Creek supply is not compliant, and it won't be compliant in the future. And it's highlighted as the costs associated with making this supply compliant would not be viable financially. How much would it cost to make that scheme compliant?
So in addition to water treatment, there is constant that inlet for that water supply is very prone to slips and debris. and which Mr. Sullivan referred to, because we're on constant consultation with him about maintenance of that inlet, which is problematic in itself. So every time after rain, it has to be cleaned out and it's got an intake problem there. So we will have to look at an alternative supply anyway.
I understand that, but like, what would it cost to make it compliant? Would it be more than $334,000?
Yes.
How much more?
Significantly more, 800,000.
$800,000. Well, I'd like that in there if you're going to say it's not going to be compliant. Now,
So there's a second part to that. If we go down the road of then investing in a water treatment system, then there's also the additional cost to council to continue to maintain that system.
additional cost to the people on the scheme who pay for it.
Correct. So the ratepayers will then be liable for a rateable. They'll have to be rated for that water supply. Whereas the option we provide, or the recommendation is to provide water tanks, and then apart from the capital that have to be repaid, they won't be subject to water rates.
Right.
Which believes the most economical option.
Okay.
For the ratepayers.
Here we go. So the recommendations is, we hold a community in Harry with the affected households. Now, why wasn't this done first? Why weren't seven?
The decision is council's decision to go forward.
Yeah, but you've got to talk to these people. We're talking about 7 phone calls, 7 letters, 7 anythings. Like I said earlier, I'm not impressed at all that these affected parties find out about this through a phone call from a reporter. Why don't we ask, or especially in this case, why didn't you go and ask them how they see the future of the scheme? And maybe they're willing to pay to keep it compliant and all the rest of it.
Well, with respect, the issue is one where staff are responsible to council. So the first thing council needs to do is receive a report with a recommendation to say X. And X is to go and consult. It's not up to staff to go out and make a decision to close it, this down or that down. And so I actually support the staff and their process here. There's no loss. The reality is the water supply is not compliant, and there are 6 houses. So we need as a council to find out the cheapest way, the most financially beneficial way we can for these people. Otherwise, if we start talking, we say to staff, go and investigate a new water treatment plant, maybe 700 or 800 grand, and it'll come back around the table, and we will say, well, that's that rate on that for each person is going to be this, and we'll all go, oh, that's no good. Now, the process that staff adopted is, in my view, absolutely correct.
But just further to it, like I say, I don't think that we can support an option in terms of council and vote on it. In terms of option 1, we vote to close down the Harold Creek scheme. I don't think we can vote on that. I'd like that removed from the recommendations, because it's up to those people on the scheme what option to take, is it not?
Let's go around the table and then we'll clarify option B or point B in the option as to whether that is the view around the table.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And just on the, Leslie mentioned earlier on the terms of the consultation, the council can't seem to be preempting or trying to lead people in any direction. Is that right?
You can make a recommendation though.
You can make the recommendation. Okay.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, very interesting. Just a couple of technical questions before I get into the matter. There's a reference in here to a fault avoidance zone. What is that? Alpine fault avoidance zone.
So that's the Alpine fault line. And it's that area in particular is prone to a lot of slips during rainfall events, which is creating the issue of maintaining the inlet anyway.
So
And it's probably unrelated to the fact that the water quality is really the issue here. It's sort of mentioned by the way, but I mean, it's one of those additional issues that sort of veers away from trying to do anything with that water intake long term.
Yeah, I asked because it's just sort of another thing that's in here randomly, and I don't know if it's talking to the old fault rupture avoidance zone, plan change zoned area, or if it's near the fault line. I don't know. I'm just seeking some clarification because it's pretty. The intake is situated on the alpine fault avoidance zone. I thought, okay. The other thing is around.
Nathan, Fiona, just speak to that, please.
Clarification. So the area that was labelled as fault avoidance zone did go through plan change scheme. That is what it's referring to.
Okay.
However, it's not a zone.
Okay.
That's probably the confusing matter. It didn't become a zone. It's just an area that we know that there's potential for grounding formation in that area.
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Louis. Interesting that a rating assessment hadn't been identified, that had been collecting water for a while. That's another interesting thing in this report. But in terms of consultation with the community or affected users, I think we need to do that. I think it's really important. I think procedurally, I just would question what the difference is here between this process and the process used with Mint Creek, whereby the scheme was council divested its ownership of the scheme as opposed to closing or gifted it to another entity. And I'm just wondering, has that option been explored?
Right, so there's an additional point which is mentioned in the report, and that is that council currently doesn't have an easement across Mr. Sullivan's land for this pipeline. And we can either then divest the scheme, but then whoever is part of that scheme will then have to get approval from Mr. Sullivan to maintain that pipeline across his property.
Just through your worship, Main Creek is a stock feed scheme. This is supplying residents, completely different.
Okay, it was titled as a stock feed scheme.
It is a stock feed.
Yeah, yeah. So the option around divesting, are we saying legally it's not an option?
If they would, no, it is an option, but they would have to bring it up to the standard.
Yes, that's right. So council and the water regulator or proposed water regulator would be responsible for ensuring at some certain date that it was brought up to standard. And that's aside from what we're dealing with right now, though, which is around council's ownership and council's current obligations as the owner of the scheme to have to bring it up to freshwater drinking standards.
Correct.
The owner will still have to do that provided the scheme continues to operate. And that's why I'm saying has the option around some sort of community ownership, affected party ownership, effectively the people that are drawing the water, has that been explored as an option where they could take legal ownership of it? And the issue around an easement could be a red herring because potentially the persons whose property that crosses may become part of the legal entity. I'm just saying, is it an option that's been explored? And I'm hearing it kind of has, but not really.
It's not an option we've explored. We know it's non-compliant now. To transfer it to someone knowing that they have to upgrade it, I think that resolves liability.
Yeah.
The issue here is we would have to ensure that the new owners would have guaranteed upgrading as part of the conditions of transfer, which we know is already a considerable sum based on what we've evaluated.
All of this information makes it so much clearer, I think, so much clearer to lead into these recommendations around why we would propose this as the course of action with that rationale around some of these things that we've just heard. So having this discussion has been really good. I think the recommendations make sense, apart from I have a question around this binding referendum. So who actually takes part in this referendum?
So the affected parties.
So there's 7 properties and binding. So, well, it's an odd number. So hopefully it will go one way or another. But are we obligated that if they vote in favour of it being closed, we carry out that?
The consultation process will obviously, if it opens up other avenues that they want to investigate, then that is what we'll entertain. The purpose of this report is to say we will consult with the community on the basis of our recommendation. And if that process takes us down a different path, then so be it.
Through your worship, they're not obliged to buy into the new scheme. They can potentially put their own water tank system in or whatever options they choose.
Just trying to get clarity. The consultation, all that makes sense. The public meeting, absolutely agree. Question and answers, that's all sense. But then hold a binding referendum under the local government Act to close down a small water service. So at the same time, as we're doing the consultation on options, we're asking them, what are we actually doing? What is this binding referendum? Is it a question? Do you wish to close the Harold Creek water scheme? Tick yes, tick no. Is that what this referendum would look like?
Council has to provide safe drinking water and cannot continue to do that through the scheme. So the consultation will be around closing down the scheme for the purpose of supplying drinking water. Mm-hmm. And then as an alternative, council will propose the recommendation in putting in rainwater tanks, which council will front up with the capital for that, and then ratepayers will have a targeted rate of a flexible period of time to repay it.
Yeah, no, I understand the implications of if they vote to close it, but I'm just asking where does this referendum sit?
The referendum is about closing down the water supply
and so,
as a potable water supply.
And if they tick no, and it's a binding referendum, what does that mean for us?
It means an alternative solution for safe water supply needs to be found, and council still remains responsible for that water supply.
Can I interrupt and ask a question? Who makes the decision here, the final decision? Is it them or us?
As long as council is responsible for the water supply, we need to advise the community of the correct quality of water that we have to supply in the process of how we're going to do that. If they disagree, then council cannot continue to provide us the current supply, and we'll have to come up with a resolution on how we can provide water supply, or they do it themselves. They can buy their own water tank and a pump and put in their own system if they choose. There's not many solutions here. It's probably the situation we're in.
The words binding makes sense. If the question is, do you wish to close the Harold Creek water scheme? Yes, tick. But if the majority say no, 4, say that's the majority, because there's 7 people being consulted.
Sorry, just on that, Latham, to close down the water service by 75% or more of the votes cast.
Yeah.
So only 3 have to tick no.
Essentially.
And then that's binding. What does binding actually mean? That's what I'm trying to get to the crux of. What is it?
Perhaps I can help there, Louis. If 4 out of the 7 say no, then no is the answer. Council can't continue to supply water that doesn't meet the regulations, but we would still be responsible. So we would then have to go and look at an alternative. Well, the alternative they've looked at is 3 times more expensive. What we've got here is a reasonably straightforward process. For me, it's and I agree with you, Ryan. If Sully's name hadn't been in it, it would have been a whole lot better. But this is a reasonably straightforward process. We have the unfortunate task of having to address this matter and giving staff steerage on it. And this is the recommendation, which of course we can change as we get around. But perhaps we can hear everybody.
Yep.
Councillor Hart.
I just had some of the concerns around the consultation process, but that's kind of been answered. But the 334K for if we went with that more sort of permanent option, that's quite substantial. I mean, that's $100 a metre, but is that, that's quite a lot of money. Is that everything from earthworks to
Yes.
piping to, there's no more upgrades required to the existing?
No, that's purely the pipeline. It will run about 3.5 kilometres in the to that area.
Seems quite substantial though.
Yeah.
For that, and it would be a more permanent option to have, have the water from the treatment plant, wouldn't it? But it's quite a difference between that and 60K for the tanks. Yeah, that
Because
was,
it's a targeted rate, obviously, it
Yeah.
makes a significant difference.
Yeah.
So council's recommendation is the low cost option, which we believe is the recommendation that's more sensible in this case.
Okay.
Councillor Cody.
Muted.
You're on mute, councillor.
On mute there, Jenny.
Yep. Okay, sorry about that. I've got a few things obviously with this. First of all, is that I find the whole situation actually quite disturbing. And I can appreciate from Mr. Sullivan and those affected parties out in the community why they'd be feeling a little bit peeved about the whole process and how it's actually come to the council table. I just assumed that when we received the report that the first thing that would have happened prior to that coming to us would have been that these people all would have been, clarification would have been to both Mr. Sullivan and these people stating that information, because it does change a little bit of my thinking now around what I anticipated that my answer was going to be. I totally agree. And in the perfect world, I totally agree with John Sullivan around a bit of nothing wrong with having a bit of bad stuff out there. And typically, it's not the way of the world anymore. The other concern that I have around here too is that if this is one particular area that we're focused on at the moment in Harry, well, it highlights to me, is there other areas around the region that the same thing is happening? I mean, is it just specifically to this one pipeline on this one property in Harry? So I would like to know more about how many other affected parties there are. I do not support voting on this today. I'm very much like Councillor Kennedy when it comes to this. I think that what needs to happen first is that, and I think it's ethically right, that we should be going back to the affected parties and letting them and initially having a conversation with them around what the options are, why it's come about. I understand that the water regulations is new legislation coming in, but hey, let's then address that, then give them an opportunity to have some feedback. I mean, we're sitting here having discussions about, well, there is no easement. Well, how do we know unless we have discussions whether Mr. Sullivan might have agreed to having an easement on there to solve some of that cost and those issues for those people? So yeah, just and I'd also request that from now on, before we receive documentation like this to read over for council, that when it's specifically naming people out in the community with these issues, that the facts actually are checked first before it turns into a document that comes to us.
Thanks, Councillor Cody. Francois.
just a couple of things. Just firstly, the preferred recommendation makes perfect sense, and I understand that and support that. That one question is, we've tapped in to Sullivan's system. Is that correct?
Yep. Correct.
So we're only shutting down, or we're only proposing or wanting to close down a portion of that system, because we can't obviously close down his. Correct?
We're not closing down the system, we're just disconnecting the houses from actually receiving potable water from that system.
Right.
It's not potable.
It's not potable water at present, correct?
Right. And what's the cost of say what would be the rough cost of bringing that system up to a standard?
So as I said before, to put a full treatment system on there would be about $800,000.
And is that the minimum? Is that we couldn't bring that up to some standard cheaper than that and then hand it over to?
Unfortunately, that's a full chlorination system required for that intake.
Okay. Oh well, the back's against the wall, isn't it? I agree that we've got to talk to them, what you're saying, Jenny, and talk to them about it, obviously. But I guess the writing's on the wall, isn't it? They need a water system. We've got to supply it. So it looks like the recommendation, that option is probably it. But yes, I support going out and talking to them in the first instance. Got it.
Councillor Hartwell.
Yes, it's a very tricky situation, isn't it? I had John ring me too, and fortunately it's all been talked about. I had half a page of stuff here he'd commented on. I also had a phone call from Wayne Spencer. He's an absentee landowner down there, and going back to putting tanks in, Lou, he said that Ministry of Health, 80% of them fail test even though they've been put in. I'm just bringing this up because he's told me, and just so other people know. We know we've got to upgrade to new standards, but he's concerned about us moving so quickly on this without having robust conversation. One thing he was keen to see, have we explored the national support or the 3 waters or anything to get some water funding for this as a separate system? And like Councillor Martin was saying, yes, if we could hand it back to them and they do their own thing, it's the same thing. They're going to put water tanks in and the same as what we're going to do. So look, it's very tricky, but we need to sort of agree on being able to go to consultation. And as Lou said, if they can't agree, there's going to have to be some other option come out. But it sounds like, from my understanding, we can't close it anyway because it's not ours to close. Is that correct?
So the consultation process needs to proceed, and that's what we're asking council. One of the points that we recommend council approve today. So we can enter into consultation, and we have to consult because those ratepayers will specifically be target rated for the capital investment required to bring the system up to standard. We can't force that. Council needs to consult with them on the solution.
Yeah, I just fear we're going to be chasing our tail when all 7 of them say we're not going to close it. What's their option then?
Lots of money.
A very expensive option for them.
So the council can walk away from it? Or if they say no, does the council have to come up with the upgrade? Or
yeah, which will include a targeted rate back to them.
Yeah, so yeah. It sounds like the tanks is the feasible outcome, but at the end of the day, if they say tanks, they don't want tanks, do we have to spend $350,000 on a pipeline? Is there any idea on that?
If we do, the ratepayers or those affected by that decision will have to then repay the capital for that investment over a flexible period of time. That is an option for them.
Yeah.
Councillor Davidson. Oh, sorry, Ian, did you have it further?
No, Your Worship. Just that we definitely need some consultation on this, and I'm a bit undecided whether we can make that decision today or not, but we'll have a vote, I suppose. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Your Worship. What's the water quality readings? For example, E. coli and bacteria.
That's irrelevant. It's the potential risk of because that river intake is open to wildlife.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's how the regulation looks at it.
Yeah. So my question is, are there any have you had any readings?
I can't clearly answer that question, but if there was any spikes, then I would be really concerned, and the community would certainly be aware of it. But that's the risk we have to mitigate.
Yeah, okay. So there's no readings about the quality of the water at all.
That intake is not a monitored system.
If there had been reports of Campylobacter from that, then really it would have come through the health system and potentially have been identified anyway, wouldn't it?
Yep.
And someone would know about it.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah. I know things have changed. The standards have changed, but there's water supplies out at Lake Canary for campgrounds, and at Landfill, Hokitika Gorge, and and they're tested. It looks like we're going to be changing those sorts of things too. Is that with the new standards?
That's a fair assessment.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Neal.
Oh, interesting discussion. I thought this was going to be a fairly quick little subject and we'll go, yeah, that sounds good. Because that's what I was thinking. My only comments before the discussion really were making sure that the cost can be a bit flexible so that if they go with the tank system, they can actually say, we'll sort our own one out and we can do it for under 10,000 because
that's what the consultation process is about.
We'll show
if they prefer to do their own, that's fine.
As long as that's an option, I'm pretty happy about that. It's a shame that John was upset about that, and a written apology from the council I think would be smooth the waters a wee bit, and that would be good. The 75%, just out of interest, you actually need 6 out of the 7 people to get above the 75%.
6 out of 7, yes, sorry.
And if only some of them want to go with the expensive option, so let's say only 5 of them want to, then their percentage payment would go up relatively, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Yeah, so it might only cost them 60,000 or whatever each, but actually it could end up costing them 100,000.
So the 60,000 is based on typically $10,000 per household.
Yeah.
Provide a tank and a pump.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're dividing the 300 and whatever thousand between 7 people, if only some of them want to do it, it will be the same amount divided between 3 people or whatever. I'm pro going back to the consultation, and I certainly think the preferred option is a sensible way to go. Yeah, definitely.
Is it?
Through the chair, can we just clarify here that this is a capital contribution targeted rate we're looking at, which would only affect those 7 ratepayers. As Louis said, the other option is to go with either lending the thing or a treatment plant. That would be a district line rate. That would be part of the rating. So we just need to keep the two things separate. And then they would be responsible for paying rates going forward.
Sorry, so the tanks are on the ratepayer, but the pipe would be different.
Yeah, those water tanks are on those 7 ratepayers only. And then they would not pay water rates going forward because that would be it. But if we were have to put a scheme in or lengthen the pipe, that would be a district, right? That would affect the whole district's water rate because that's how we work with water rates. That's how we rate them. But they would be responsible for paying rates going forward.
Yeah, so they're currently paying 283 for untreated water. And theirs would go to 377.
77 or if we're putting in a cost per plant, it would increase. So everybody's water rate would increase.
Right.
Everyone from Tamara to Haas.
Yeah, who pays the water rate.
Okay, we'll move on to Deputy Mayor Grant. Can you make a suggestion, please? How we move forward?
Well, we need to amend the resolution, don't we? What's your thoughts? So so that we're not seen to be preempting.
So through the chair, taking advice and hearing councillors and also Mr. Sullivan, I recommend that we modify the recommendations to point A, we receive the report, and B, that we hold a community meeting in an area with affected parties outlining the options available and leave it there. And we'll come back at a future date with a recommendation for council.
Okay, so that would seem to accommodate the concerns. So the suggestion at this time is that there is a resolution that A, council receive the report, and B, council hold a community meeting in Harry with the affected households, outlining the options available, allowing time for questions and answers. End of story. Would someone like to test the table with that resolution? Councillor Cogan, Councillor Hartry. Those in favour? Is there anyone against? That's a good discussion, councillors. It's always difficult, and thank you for the way you've handled that.
Can I ask a question? How potable is the water that comes out of the tank?
Mine's great.
We've got dead birds and kinds of stuff. And how much better is that?
So the regulation in there is what point is rainwater tanks, if it's actually plumbed into a modern tank these days, then there's limited. They've got obviously you have sipsy and so on in the pipe system, so to prevent birds from entering the tank. You don't have open lids on them, so it's pretty safe.
Just through the chair, obviously they come with filter systems included. There's also the option of UV as part of that process, and that potentially will be a way that other parties will manage smaller private schemes with UV treatment.
Council, move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the three.
Sorry, through the chair.
Councillor.
Through the chair.
Councillor Cogan.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, just through the chair, just quickly. On top of that motion, I just would like if it can be noted with some confidence that we're not back in a situation like this again, and from now on, if reports are going to be presented, that we clarify the information is accurate from parties before it comes to council.
We'll record that in the minutes. Councillor Cogan. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Three Waters Service Delivery Reform Program Report. And the Chief Executive is going to drive us through that.
Good afternoon again, councillors. as alluded to at the last council meeting, we have a proposal for you today. Just to let you know that the majority of councils around New Zealand have all agreed and signed the MOU. So I will need to advise post this event regarding our status. And just to let you know also that Grey and Waller have also signed, so the 2/3 majority will allow them to receive the funding. So the report is to provide seek council support for signing a memorandum of understanding with the Crown and agreeing to participate in an initial stage of essential local government Three Waters service delivery reform program. The issue arises for the need for council to provide post-COVID stimulus to maintain and improve Three Waters infrastructure and participate in the conversation of the 3-year program of reform for local government water service delivery arrangements and support the establishment of a Tomato ROI, which is the new water services regulator. I just want to point out a few things in the report, and I know there's a lot of information in the appendix, and I apologise for that, but this is a standard report that's been circulated to all councils. Just the progress in terms of what's happening with the Three Waters regulatory reforms. Just the bullet points at 2.2. So the targets are designed to improve national level leadership oversight and support relating to Three Waters through the creation of a new entity for the water services regulator, significantly strengthen compliance, monitoring and enforcement of related to drinking water regulation, quite pertinent based on discussion just previously had. Manage risks to drinking water safety, ensure sources of drinking water are protected, and improve environmental performance and transparency in relation to wastewater and stormwater networks. I will take the rest of the report as read, but highlight what the proposal recommendations actually are. I just would like to highlight also that at a Mayors and Chairs Forum on the 12th of August 2020, that the mayors of each of the 3 districts has agreed to use the same calculations for the territorial authorities delegated funding to use the regional delegated funding. Hence our Western District Council's total funding will be approximately $6.8 million of Three Waters funding.
Was that per capita, a per capita base?
No, it's based on the formula that Department of Internal Affairs have worked out, but based on total land mass, which is based at 25% of that calculation, and number of ratepayers, number of users. So that's been seen as the most fair and equitable process across New Zealand.
Thanks, Simon. We'll take the report as read and open it up, and we'll go anti-clockwise. Councillor Neal.
No questions. Yeah, it looks good. Thank you.
Councillor Davidson.
No, nothing further.
Councillor Cogan.
Just a couple of things. One is I'm actually really pleased that they've brought this in, and that we're going to get, a good whack of the money to actually come to the Westland District to help support that. I just had one question, was in discussion with the other councils, because I know it talks throughout the document about that all 3 councils obviously need to be in agreement with the bigger concept of it all, because there is some stuff that will be joint having to pay together. So do we have full support of Greymouth and Buller?
Correct. Yes, we do, Jenny.
Through your worship, I'd just like to clarify that we have, and I've alluded to it in the past, we are working with a consultant, Tonkin and Taylor, to look at what the Three Waters reform looks like for a West Coast entity or a West Coast model. And we are also talking with Canterbury district councils and Melbourne and Tasman district councils to look at what a model as a Canterbury region looks like, or Canterbury Super 15 sort of looks like. So that's just still underway at the moment.
Francois?
No, support the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Hartshorn? Councillor Hartshorn, you're on mute. That seems to be thumbs up.
Right, sorry about that. Yeah, no, it's, I totally support it. It's gonna give us a bit of money to go forward and do things. So yeah, no, 100% behind it.
Councillor Hart?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I fully support the recommendation. It's a fair, substantial amount of funds coming in to the community. I just around the expectations for tranche 1 and the nature of the reporting that we are required to do for that, does that mean a substantial increase for staffing?
Through Your Worship, we don't see that there'll be an increase for staffing. There will be a challenge delivering on it, so the program we are working through in terms of highlighting those projects that we'd like to use that fund for, and they are critical projects already in our long-term plan. And we are also trying to look at spreading that 6.9 across the whole region, not just focused on the likes of Hokitika or the larger projects, but spread the grant across all the district.
Yep. And that's the only set out on whatever it was, page 87 of the agenda. That's the sort of the only expectations or KPIs that we're required to meet as per the.
We're confident we can meet those.
Yep.
Yeah.
No further questions.
So as part of this process, we will have to provide a scope of works with a delivery program that goes with it. And Louis Sparks is working with his team on defining what that looks like and getting costings for each of those projects now.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Your Worship. My assessment of it is good. I think three reasons. I think it gives us a decent chunk of CapEx funding and as well as operational funding in the future. I think I have some concerns with it, but being in the camp rather than out of the camp so much better. You know, our ability to actually influence the reforms as they go through is much stronger if we're working in the system with the sector and with the government. So whatever the government looks like. So I think that's really good. My only question is, why wouldn't we do it?
Through the Worship, I don't see any fish hooks right now. Tranche 2 comes with a lot of fish hooks.
Yes.
And I think that's already been made clear at the relevant forums that have been going around New Zealand. That the other challenge that the 3-year program has, and we've highlighted this through to DIA, is it's not linked to the long-term plan process or the annual plan process, which it needs to be, because if we are looking at tranche 2 decisions within the next 12 months, that falls outside the long-term plan process. So we've asked them to revisit their schedule to align with the annual plan, because we don't want to go out and do special consultation or LTP amendments halfway through a year.
There'd be a lot of councils in that boat though.
All councils are in the same boat.
So really the assessment is, at this stage, tranche 1, there's no risk. It's better for us as a council and district to subscribe to
the
this.
advantage that we've already started doing the assessments of our own infrastructure, that information can be passed straight over with no additional work.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Your Worship.
Councillor Kennedy.
No, good. Pleasing to hear that Westland came out on the right side of a calculation. Just in terms of when this money comes in and when do we start spending it? Like what's?
It's really dependent on the delivery plan. So we're actually scoping their work up. That delivery plan then gets approved by the Department of Internal Affairs as you're meeting the criteria.
Yeah.
And we'll pick in straight away as soon as we can.
So I just raise it because we've been promised a fair bit of money and, you know, for things and nothing's quite happened. But yeah, good, thank you.
Thank you, Worship. It'd be madness, of course, to turn it down, something like this. But however, I'm not so easily seduced myself. I think it's a bit of a cynical move, really, by the government to dangle a very juicy carrot, $7 billion in front of your nose, and to really think that the council's going to turn that down was a bit silly. I just hope that's not a signal of future ways of government doing business with local government, because that would be a worry. At the Mayors and Chairs meeting that Tonkin and Taylor said about the model for the future model under Taumata Aroha, Taumata, whatever it is, and said that it's very unlikely that the government will buy the idea of a West Coast alliance for it, which would, as the Chief Executive said, lump us in with Canterbury in the super model. I have to say that Ngāi Tahu were the only iwi to oppose that the water reform bill, and that was for reasons because Ngāi Tahu had other aspirations for fresh water, so we just need to state that, and we need to ensure that the consultation with iwi continues at every step for this. With the Papatū Runanga, but also with Ngāi Tahu. And also Ngāi Tahu has taken a tribal view on this and wants to ensure that if there is a model that's imposed on councils, because I think it's going to be imposed rather than agreed, then that needs to be within Ngāi Tahu Rohi. In other words, not extended to Marlborough and Nelson, for instance. It needs to be so that Ngāi Tahu has a consistent approach over the future of the water. And finally, I make no mistake that this is going to come back and it's going to hit every ratepayer in the back pocket very hard in the future. It's all very well to grab $7 million, it's great, but in the next stage, and there's not really many or any strings attached to that $7 million, but the next stage is, although you're not compelled to buy into it, the implication is that you've now stepped on the road and you're on that treadmill, and you get dragged along with it. And as Councillor Martin said, it's better to be inside the tent than outside it. However, the cynic in me says that this is going to be a very expensive exercise in the long run, and I think it's going to hit individual ratepayers heavily in the future. But that's Big Brother.
Expensive what? What do you say?
Because the expectation of these reforms are going to be, there's going to be much greater regulation over the provision of fresh water, drinking water, and also wastewater, which we're going to use. Oh, and the other thing that I did want to say was that the $7 million is also has to be spent in double quick time, because it's essentially like the shovel-ready funding. So you can't sit on it, so it's going to be of no use to us for Hokitika for the wastewater changes that we're anticipating.
Just through the chair, so we are targeting some of that money to go into design work for the Hokitika ones and consultation work. So that front end process to get that going.
So that's my question. What relevance is this to our big problem, which is the land-based wastewater project?
So through the chair, we have allocated some of this portion. We haven't got it finalised in terms of what we're going to target yet, but part of that process will be funding some of the design work for the Hakatiko wastewater treatment plant.
And so in terms of the building of that, it's a time issue, they're saying, we've got to do it within a certain period of time.
Yes, so there are obviously a lot of projects on our books in Three Waters anyway, so we're not going to put all the funds just to one project. We're going to try and stimulate growth across the district rather than just one project. There's also a resource consent process that we would have to follow before we would have to get a final ISO wastewater plant in Hakatiko.
Thanks, councillors. I think one of the things that's very clear is that we've been allocated over $43 million in Westland for matters that we simply would not have been able to afford as a council. And there is an ongoing cost, but the projects like Franz Joseph Rockworks has been ongoing for 12 years, 13 years. And we're in the lucky position of being around the council table that where the staff have collectively managed to negotiate what is a pretty exciting way forward. So, sorry, Councillor Hartchell, you're waving there. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Worship, you've taken the words out of my diary, to tell you the truth. I've just got written down here. I wanted to commend yourself, Simon, and the other councillors on what you have done in getting all those subsidies, monies and grants. It's probably not the right time to discuss it, but you're on it, and we should be proud of what this council's achieved by those figures you have just said. So just like to commend you on that while you're on the subject.
Thank you, Councillor Hartchell. I don't think it's over yet. We have a proposed resolution. And I'd seek that someone move it, but it is that A, Council receive the report. B, that Council agree to signing the memorandum of understanding and funding agreement as tabled. C, that Council agree to nominate the Chief Executive of the Council as the primary point of communication for the purposes of the MOU and Reform Program, as referred to in page 6 of the MOU. And D, agree to delegate discussions about the allocation of regional funding to the Chief Executive of the Council. Delegate decisions? Okay. Agree to delegate decisions about the allocation of regional funding to the Chief Executive of the Council, with the understanding that the minimum level of funding to the Council be based upon the formula used to calculate the direct Council allocations, and noting that participation by 2/3 of the territorial authorities within the West Coast region is required to access the regional allocation. And I'd ask someone to move that. Councillor Kennedy, thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Hart. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you.
I'm sorry, just a quick question there, Simon. How reliant are we as a district moving forward going to be on all this funding from the government? Heavily, extremely? I know it's a pretty vague question.
It certainly helps, yes. Councillor Kennedy. We have finished our Three Waters activity management plans recently, and we know that a lot of our assets are particularly the underground assets, are aged quite significantly, and we have a renewals program that is quite challenging. So we'll be highlighting that through the long-term plan process, but this goes a long way to addressing, I suppose, some short-term fixes that we need to do anyway.
Cool, thank you.
Move to the next item on the agenda, which is the financial performance for July 2020. It's on pages 103 to 112 of your agenda, and I'd invite Leslie Crichton, Group Manager Corporate Services to present the agenda item.
Good afternoon, through the chair. I'll take the report as read and answer any questions.
Paul.
No questions.
Councillor Kennedy.
I just one question. Usually we get the, the carryovers and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I can see in the cover report, I've said it's a summarised report because we don't have the financial year-end figures yet. We need those figures to get balanced.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you, Leslie.
Councillor Martin.
Kia ora, thanks, Bruce. Leslie, thanks for the report. On carryovers, that won't be coming till the next council meeting, is at the earliest, right, in terms of council approving carryovers for the financial year? Is that?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Still working on the year-end figures and that takes everybody's time.
Yeah, so that will clarify when we will see that, yeah, in terms of process. But it's an interesting year to start and things look good, but yes, month one of a particularly interesting year. So I'll be interested to see what the zero rates increase actually does to us as a council going forward. And I'm sure that's going to be measured somehow. Leslie?
Well, we're just looking at what the budget we kind of finished with, which was a 1.something increase, I can't remember offhand. So we'll just have to look at the variances between that.
Are you going to keep a report to council in terms of variances, significant variances against budget that affect operating income?
That will come through this financial report. We'll be keeping that in the same report.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Lucy. I just have one question on the notes around the grants and subsidies. Is that where you accrue to match expenditure for that particular grant?
So it's grant money that's we received last year, which hasn't yet been matched up to the expenditure.
Yep. No, that's all. Thank you.
Councillor Hartwell.
Leslie, I just had one question. It's just for my own learning than anything else, probably. The liquidity risk need to be over 110%, and it's currently sitting at 165.65. What is the other end of the scale?
146.65, 146, let's say.
Yes, it says 146.65 now. Must be over that, but what is the range from 110 to?
Oh, there's no range.
There's no range.
No, it has to be over 110.
Okay, no, simple as, but otherwise no questions.
The more the better. Francois.
No, just echoing Councillor Martin's words around. I'm really interested to see what the budgets look like with the zero.
Good. Councillor Kogan.
No questions for me. Thanks for that, Leslie.
Councillor Davidson.
Nothing from me, Leslie. Thank you.
Councillor Hart. And Deputy Mayor. So I'd like to move that council receive the financial performance report for July of 2020. Moved Councillor Neal, seconded Councillor Hart. Those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Good report, Leslie. Thank you. We'll move on to the interim audit management report for the year ended 30th of June 2020, and it's set out on pages 113 to 135. Leslie.
Again, I'll take the report as read. This is the interim audit management report. So this is from our interim audit that took place between May and June.
Start on the right hand side. Councillor Neal.
No, nothing.
Councillor Davidson.
No, nothing from me.
Councillor Kogan. You're on mute, Councillor Kogan. You're still on mute.
Right. No, the only thing from me is actually a congratulations, to be honest. I noticed that we had, we didn't even sit on the report anywhere under the urgent priority. And of the 21 recommendations, pretty much they're either completed or they're well under control. And I actually did agree with their recommendation as well. I thought that was good around the top 10 risks that they'll be presented quarterly. I think that's actually a really good idea, but in general, shows you guys are doing a fabulous job as far as everything to do with the auditing around the council. So well done, Simon and the team.
Thank you, I'll pass that on to the team.
Francois?
No, nothing from me.
Councillor Hatchell?
No, nothing from me. That's all good. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Hart?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, no, great to see no urgent recommendations, and the remainder marked as necessary are have either been reviewed and commented by management or have been completed. And as per Councillor Cogan, huge body of work, having just in the process of doing one myself. But so yeah, thank the team for all their work because it's substantial.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thanks for the report, Leslie. I noted their comments were interesting. Congratulations to the team for the work progress to date on this. First as a writer over my comments, but their model financial statements, they've used tertiary education institutions to, as that's just generic audit templated financials. So they're not suggesting that we adapt to this.
No, I
Keen to see them.
they have actually made mistakes there with that.
Yeah.
But they didn't rectify it for the final one.
And it's extortion, their fees. I can't believe that we are, as a sector, held to task to pay significant audit fees. I absolutely agree with the responsibilities we have around public money and accounting standards, but they only seem to be going in one way, these audit fees. So when we get to things like the long-term plan and we go, we want to keep rates increases down, and we're going, there's another $30,000, $40,000 needed to pay for audit, it's significant, and it does have implications on small councils. So it's something at some stage as a sector, I think we have to get in a discussion about. My technical questions around the asset information, it's in progress, but are we sure that we're on track to get that asset information valuation sorted for the final report audit?
The evaluations.
Yeah, they talk.
Evaluations, I will actually ask the chair if Louis could speak to that.
That would be helpful, thank you.
You repeat the question, please.
Sorry, just repeat your question.
Of course, my question's around, just so everyone's clear, on page 126, I think, of our agenda, page 14 of the interim audit report, the necessary recommendation from last year around asset information and valuations, and we've got that it's going to be tested in the final audit, but we had a number of things we needed to do. I understand we've done significant work in this space in the last 12 months, and I'm curious whether this will disappear as be closed off in terms of something that's plagued the council for a number of years in terms of the information around its assets and the valuations around its assets.
Right, so there's a current role being recruited for as a manager for council. It's going to take potentially another 2 years to get an asset management system to absolutely 100%. And there's also a subsequent role that will for later in the year, which is asset engineer role, and those two roles will definitely feed into getting that asset management system up to date. But we've made significant progress on it, and I think we at this stage I would put it at least above 80% complete. But yeah, probably 24 months, not 24 months to get it 100% right.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Thanks. That was the pressing. I think it's the pressing one because I think it will appear again. just us being really aware of the conditions of our assets and why, if we aren't there where they suggest we should be, what are the barriers to being there? And it sounds like it's a staffing, potentially a resourcing barrier that's existed or exists.
Through the chair, if you reflect back on the 12 months or 18 months worth of work we've done in this space, the big piece of work is around the activity management plans and getting those revalued and recalibrated. So we've spent a lot of our time just working on particularly the 3 waters component of that. That's currently with a final draft and does highlight, like I said earlier, some major concerns around asset condition and asset age. The next part is to get an owner for that piece of work ongoing. This is what the new asset manager role is all about, supported by a documentation process, and the asset engineer will assist in doing their own in-field asset evaluations as well. So it has been a plan of our life for the last 3 years, and now we're putting a plan together to actually have it addressed on an ongoing basis. It will take 18 months to 2 years to get it really fine-tuned, but that's the target, is to have it pretty well locked down, and I suppose will be a strength going forward rather than a weakness.
Thanks, Simon. Councillor Kennedy.
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Just a comment, thank you, Worship. Considering where we've been, is a good result and the outstanding points. So Brett's are nice, really. So it is a well done.
Deputy Leader Ellis.
How's the audit and risk committee functioning under the new chair? Is that reflected in the performance of the committee?
I think it was too soon to actually take effect because this count was carried out in May, June, and the committee only really kicked off in March.
Okay.
So, but it certainly will do.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Leslie. I invite a councillor to move the resolution that we received the interim audit management report for the year ended 30th of June 2020. Councillor Hart, do I have a second there? Councillor Davidson, those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you very much. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the policy matter, and it's the appointments to the District Licensing Committee. It's on pages 136 to 145 of your agenda, and I invite Tiara Cook, our Regulatory Services Manager, to present the report.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors. I too will take the report as read. However, I wish to emphasise that the reason this report has come about is because of administrative things that didn't take place back in 2014, which would have avoided this issue. So we're just trying to catch up on ensuring that we put a robust, transparent policy in place that enables us to appoint members to the District Licensing Committee. And I reiterate that the appointment is for the members, not in terms of the chair of the District Licensing Committee. So with that addition, are there any questions?
Thank you. We'll take the report as read and open it up for discussion. Paul.
Thank you. No questions.
I just on 1.4 in terms of the who can be a person. So the person has to have relative experience with liquor licensing matters, but can't be involved or appear to be involved with that alcohol industry. Whereas the majority of people who have experience with liquor licensing matters are people involved in the alcohol industry. So it just seems a bit odd to me, you know.
That's correct, and it was advised to us back in the day.
Yeah.
Legislation was passed as well, but obviously because of that, in terms of government making that a requirement, is to ensure the minimisation of conflicts of interest in terms of a licensed owner or operator making decisions on non-licensed owner operators, despite the fact that they would have the experience.
Thank you, TC.
Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the report, Tiara. Purely administrative, and I support the recommendations as per.
Councillor Hart.
No further questions, thank you.
Councillor Hartshall.
Yes, no further questions, Your Worship.
No, nothing from me. Happy to support.
Councillor Cogan,
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, just one question. You mentioned about government requirement. Are we required to have this committee?
Yes, it's set under the Stars Supply of Alcohol Act in 2012, so it's about the establishment of committees to make determinations and defend the applications for liquor licences.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Hart. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bean.
No, that's good, thank you. Just a couple of comments. There's a couple of spelling or grammatical errors. Can I just send those through? Fine. And I know from Safer Communities meetings, certainly public health and people are very keen to put forward presentations to the committee. If it could happen, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bean. And Deputy Mayor Rudd. I believe that we as a council should recognise the good work that Timmy Team did as a licensing member of our licensing committee for many years. He's passed away, and I just think that we should record our appreciation.
Definitely.
Now we have a recommendation. That is that that A, council adopt the appointment of members of the district licensing committee policy, and B, that council endorses the DLC appointments committee comprising of the mayor, deputy mayor, chief executive, and the district licensing committee secretary. We invite councillor to make that resolution. Councillor Martin, thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Kennedy. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you for that. Move on to the next item, which is the annual dog control policies and practices report. It's on pages 146 to 154 of your agenda. And who's will be presenting that? Thank you, TC.
Thank you, wishes and councillors. Once again, take the report as read, as specified under the report. It's a requirement under section 10A of the Dog Control Act for council to report on its dog control activities for the previous financial year. It requires a resolution from council to enable that report to be for DIA and also posted on our website for public information. So no further explanation for any questions.
Thank you, Tara. We'll take the report as read, and Paul. Barking dogs.
Thank you. Just a question really as to the SPCA's role with the pound. Given that the SPCA nationally seems to be in some disarray from within the organisation, unfortunately, and there has been locally, there's been uncertainty about the future of either the Hokitika shelter. How does that fit in with the dog control situation?
So at this stage, I have been in discussions with the regional manager for SPCA right through COVID and recently. At this stage, there is no forecast near change in terms of delivery of service, or at least in terms of council being able to continue to access that facility for use of the pound services. But if that were to change, then there is already initial discussions in place in terms of what that might look like, so the council continues to be current, or that there's time to enable council to look at other options should that facility not be available. But in the near to immediate future, there is no change in terms of being able to access that for requirements for dog control power.
Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy.
No, nothing from it. More of a, I suppose it's an administrative thing in terms of renewing your dog licence. I think one thing we need to look at is moving forward is not having to print out a bit of paper and sign it. Being able to do it online, would be good.
So on that, I can advise that council at the moment working through a trial system still be formalised, which will allow the creation of forms right through council business to simplify, because it's not just dog control, it's a lot of other activities. And it's been quite supported by people in this building as well, also frustrated by the antiquated process. The more we can simplify better.
No, awesome, thank you.
Definitely in the headlights rather than the rear vision.
Thanks, TC.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. This is something I try and stay well away of, but it seems to be something that always comes up. I just feel like as soon as we've put one thing to do with dogs to bed, another one wakes up. Don't let sleeping dogs lie. But in terms of this report, administrative, completely agree with it. I had similar questions around the SPCA in terms of access to the building. There's no issue around the strength and standard of the building.
No,
We've got
access. The portion given that it's a new building, anyway, we need the requirements to operate as a town.
Yeah.
And because we needed to meet the requirements of the free requirements of SPCA, but also one SPCA is a new organisation, they are both divided in such a way that we don't cross over, so that we're ensuring there's no risk of spread of disease from dogs into the actual SPCA facilities. So that's very much managed by the policies and processes of both organisations. But we have access to that 24/7.
And it's kind of captured in here, but not really. But the anecdotal feedback is what I think elected members always hear. It's that, I have 2 dogs and I pay this much sort of stuff. Do you think we've got this right? Like from a staff perspective, do you think we've got the fees and charges framework correct in terms of public response and engagement with those fees?
It's one of those push the bag of jelly scenarios in terms of we charge this much and reduce elsewhere, somebody's got to meet the costs as we go through. But it is definitely on the list in terms of discussion with council as part of the LTP process, so that we're ensuring we're not charging more than we need to meet the cost of the activity. And if that results in a reduction of fees, whether it's urban fees or rural, or maybe even going across in terms of one district fee rather than a differentiation between. But it's also making sure that, which is sort of, I think you're touching on, is the delivery service as against what service do Puketika, Kamara, Whareroa being closer get as it's go down and past Franz Joseph and Fox. So those discussions are definitely happening in the background in terms of making sure that the quality of service is fair and equitable.
So we would expect some stage before the end of the year when we're in workshop around the LTP to be considering this policy and these fees and charges.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're looking at different types, the same where should people that are new to their dogs and being more responsible dog owners as well, which leads to, don't know about scientifically proven, but the general consensus at least to less aggression and those sort of things. So it's taking those things into account and bringing it back to council in terms of discussions on that process.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hart.
No further questions, thank you.
Councillor Hartshorn.
No further questions, Your Worship.
Francois. Councillor Cogan.
No, sorry.
Councillor Cogan.
I know this question, TC, has been asked many times before, but can you please clarify for me why a dog is cheaper to register in Hokitika than one that's like out on Canary Road? Why do they pay separate amounts?
I'm not being flippant, but because council in its wisdom, in terms of setting of fees and charges, what they have determined is the difference between a residential dog location fee as against a rural dog location fee. And that is the only difference. In terms of delivery on service, it is no difference, or the expectation is that it should be no different. But there's a lot too around the Dog Control Act that harkens back to the day when you used to have your high debtors officers, and a different service would be provided back then in terms of if you're rural, which I'm sure those of us are all a little bit longer in the tooth. I remember them coming around with the dog sausage roll and then giving a little bit of high debtors to make sure your dogs weren't at risk of different ailments, whereas in the town people look for their own. So there is no rhyme or reason to it, hence the reason to bring back to council before the end of the year around fees and charges, what we deem to be fair and equitable, which would then of course get down to people not feeling that they're not getting adequate service or that they're offsetting the charges for other people in the district.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to see, further discussion then held around that, because, I mean, unless there's a fair reason as to why you are having to pay a bit more. I can't see how you're classified as such as rural when you're, living out on properties just out on the likes of Canary Road, which, everyone lives in close proximity to each other. So when that opportunity does arise, I would like to have some input into some of those discussions.
Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, look, it's really good to see that you're considering reducing the dog fees in the future.
Spreading the load, councillor.
Councillor Deal.
I think it's something we'll be able to discuss till we're blue in the face, and we'll never get it fair, because why am I paying? My dog's never vicious or whatever, so yeah, good luck. Thank you, and I agree.
And Deputy Mayor Crothers. Right, I'll invite a councillor to put the resolution that council adopt the annual dog control policy and practices report for the year ended the 30th of June 2020. Councillor Neal, thank you. Councillor Davidson. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Thank you very much. Thanks, what's you got? Thanks, Tiara.
Here's the other, that was the other two as well.
I'd now like to move a resolution that council moves into the public excluded section and seek a second.
Sure.
Sorry, Councillor Martin. Those in favour?
Yep.
Thank you. And second was Councillor Martin. Thank you. I now advise the meeting that it'll be adjourned for 2 minutes to allow the committee secretary to disconnect Zoom from the open section. For those who joined us today, thank you very much. I hope it's been informative, and we'll now adjourn for 2 minutes for